Hello, all you scaredy cats and kittens, and welcome to the Two Scaredy Cats podcast, where we talk about all things strange, unusual, and paranormal. We're your hostess with the mostess. I'm Stacy.
I'm Kara.
So, Kara, this week I thought we'd change it up a little from our usual stuff we do, and I found this crazy news story that kind of fits in with our theme of strange, unusual, and paranormal. It's a very unusual and kind of strange story. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell you the story, and then we can talk about it a little bit after I'm done, because you're going to want to talk about this because you're going to have questions just like I have so many questions.
Oh, great.
So here's the story that I found. All right, this came from it was from in the Alabama news. So there was a person that was at a gas station in Alabama, okay? And when they went to go fill up their pump and they looked on the ground, they found a severed penis laying on the ground. And they looked all...
What?
Penis. Yes, you heard me correct. The severed male genitalia just laying on the ground right outside the pump at this gas station. And they're like, you know, it's this lady, and she was like freaking out because she had no idea where it came from. She goes in and she tells, you know, the attendant what's going on and all that. So they think is what happened is earlier in that morning, about a mile and a half away. Now, keep in mind, this is a mile and a half away from where the original incident happened. There was a guy on a motorcycle, and he somehow managed to fall off the motorcycle. And when he fell, he ended up getting run over by several vehicles. And they think is what happened because they actually ended up checking the video after this had happened at the gas station. They found that the penis, or the male genitalia, had fallen off a truck that was apparently at the seat, like it just dropped off the truck. Now, I have so many questions. Like, how can you drive this whole time with a penis stuck on your truck and not know that the penis is there? And then my other question is, the guy on the motorcycle, like, how did they, like, kill him in a way that his penis, like, popped off and landed on the truck in the first place? Like, why and how are my questions about this. It's just crazy. And this is a true story. And like I said, the guy that was in the accident was a mile and a half away from the gas station where they found this severed male genitalia. So, like, people are, like, freaking out. You know, they're wondering if maybe there's, like, a serial killer on the loose that's, you know, chopping off people's body parts and that. Or they thought maybe, you know, it was part of a murder scene from somewhere, you know. They couldn't figure out how there's just this, you know, penis just laying in the middle of the gas station. So what are your thoughts on that, Kara? What do you think about that?
I was just very confused how it got.
Thank you. Right? Because, I mean,
that.
Like, at what angle did they hit this poor gentleman? I mean, was he laying face up? Was he laying face down? Because if he was laying face down and the car rolled over him, I guess with enough force, it could pop off. But they said it was severed off. So how did it get severed off in an accident? I don't understand. It's just, it was just crazy and bizarre when I saw this. I was like, what? The what? I mean, how? In today's times, how does that happen? And I guess the guy would have probably lived, okay? Obviously not after that happened, but before that happened, because he had fallen off the bike and nobody had run over him yet. It wasn't that bad of a fall. Like, you know what I mean? He probably would have lived. But then after the 4 or 5 cars rolled over him, I mean, and how do you drive with that attached to your vehicle and not know it's there?
How far away did this
I told
happen?
you it was like a mile and a half away. So this person drove a mile and a half with the penis stuck to their car.
On his car.
And how did nobody else pass him and not know or see or, like, alert him to that? I mean, I don't know about you, but I think I would notice if there's a car driving around with something like that stuck on it, right? Unless it was stuck to the undercarriage, maybe because, like running over it and it just kind of splattered up on there. But I don't know. That's just crazy. So if you have any strange, unusual stories that you would like to share with us and have us talk about on our next podcast, please, by all means, email us at twoscaredycatspodcast@gmail.com, and we will be more than happy to talk about the story online here, or on our podcast here.
Wow.
So anyway, yeah, that's just crazy, isn't it?
A story.
Well, I told you it was a doozy of a story.
Yeah, it's not quite as cool as the haunted doll story, I think.
No, not as cool as that, but it's still kind of crazy.
Well, what is the haunted doll? Has she been up to anything?
Oh my god! So were all your friends like carrying on about that after that whole thing?
Or not that there's just one, but might be a second one.
There's
we don't know, but there could be a second one.
I have cat balls like I gave you guys that light up, and sometimes they'll light up on their own. But that's about it.
What? Okay, well that's a lot. Are you sure it's not Nacho's ghost?
But I doubt it. I haven't seen or felt her. I don't think she's around, but there was one time, like maybe about a month ago, when I was laying in the bed at one night, like how you're kind of like asleep, kind of like half awake, half asleep, and Fritz was already in the bed. You know how he lays like in between me and Dan.
Yeah, he
right,
lays.
And he was out cold because he was snoring, and all of a sudden, I felt something jump on the bed, and at first I thought maybe it was Lucy, but Lucy usually doesn't get on the bed when she only gets on the bed when Dad leaves. You know that every morning she'll jump on the bed when he gets up. Right. So it wasn't her, plus it wasn't big enough to be her, and I swear I thought it felt like it was like, you know what I mean? Like it jumped up, like you could feel it jump on the bed, and then I like felt it like kind of walk, like kind of like on my legs a little bit.
That's creepy.
I know, right? And I'm like freaking out.
That would have freaked me
Oh
out.
my god, it did. Like, I had to, like, the TV was off at that point, and you know me, I was, like, freaking out in my head, and I'm like, I'm never gonna get back to sleep, so I had to turn back on the TV, just so I had background noise to distract me.
I do that, too, if I'm too freaked out, I have to, like, listen to something in the background. It
distracts me from thinking about it, and then I'll fall asleep, but...
Yeah, well, then you can't hear the other noises.
Thank you. Exactly. And that is why I leave it on, and people wonder why I do that. It's because I don't want to hear what's going on in the room. I don't want to know.
Yeah, last night I had to do that because I was, like, freaked out.
See, when you're by yourself, yes, that happens to me, too, whenever Dad's not here.
Yeah, because I'm totally fine if, like, Mario's in the bed, but I was, like, by myself.
And then you hear every little noise.
Yeah, I hear everything. I kept hearing stuff last night, but like I said, it's just because I'm like...
yeah, I know. But that one, like, freaked me out, because it really felt like the cat was, like, rubbing on my legs or whatever, and I'm like, crazy. Okay, I'm done. Nacho. I'm like, Nacho, if that's you, okay, I'm not digging this. Stop. But yeah, and that's, like I said, it only happened once after she had passed away, so I don't know if that was her letting me know she's okay or what, but yeah, because at first I thought it was Fritz, but Fritz, like I said, I looked at Fritz, and he was, like, laying right next to me. I'm like, oh, that's not Fritz, that's not good, but that's...
just a demon.
Okay, well, it was a happy demon, because it, it was just rubbing on my leg, and that was it, and then that was the end of it.
That's so scary.
So, yep. That's the only experience I've had since the cat's been gone, so. I think you're up first this week, aren't you?
Yep.
All right, so what are you going to be what story do you have for us this week?
We're going to be talking about the Betty and Barney Hill incident, the abduction.
Okay.
It's a very popular, like, I've heard of it, but I hadn't, like, looked really deep into it lately, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't remember a lot of the stuff from this, so.
Okay.
Just a little refresher. So, the Hills lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Barney Hill worked for the USPS, and Betty worked as a social worker. They were active members of their community, and they were also members of, like, the NAACP, and Barney was on a local board of the United States Commission of Civil Rights. They were an interracial couple at this time, which was, like, the 1960s, so...
Yeah. Not a good time to be a biracial couple.
Not a good time. So, like, the fact that they, like, came out publicly about this whole incident kind of has some, like, validity to it. Because, like, normally you wouldn't want attention drawn to yourself in this situation.
No. Which
initially Barney did not want to talk about it or anything when this all goes down. He seemed to be the one... Well, he was also the black man of the couple. So
okay.
I don't blame him, but something we need to, like, at least discuss, because I feel like it does kind of have, like,
some bearing
an
on
impact
it.
to the story.
Yep.
So this is the actual encounter. It happened on September 19th, 1961. They were driving home from their honeymoon. They were going from Niagara Falls to Montreal, and then they were going back Portsmouth. They drove, like, at night, because originally they were thinking about staying in Montreal in the city, but there was, like, a hurricane that was coming through, so they were trying to get home as soon as possible.
Huh.
So when they were driving, they were about south of Lancaster, New Hampshire, when Betty sees a light in the sky move from below the moon to the west of the moon. At first, she believed that the light was a falling star. However, it would move erratically, and it continued to grow bigger as it appeared to approach them. They end up stopping the car to get a better look at the light. Barney reassured her it was probably a satellite. So Betty got binoculars out trying to get a better look, but she was not 100% convinced that it was just a satellite or whatever because of how it was moving. So she gave the binoculars back to Barney. When he was looking through it, the object actually began to approach them very fast. So the object approaching them spooked them, and they both got back in the car and they began to drive down the highway. The object began to fly in a zigzagging pattern in front of them, and it followed them for about 30 miles down the road until they got to an area called Indian Head, and it stopped in front of them in the middle of the highway. So it's just like levitating in front of them. And they described the object as a giant disc the size of like an airplane. Your normal like saucer kind of thing. Did they stop the car because like they don't know where it's going because it's like right in front of them. Barney gets out of the car with the binoculars and he continues to walk towards it. He goes about 100 feet towards the object. He's staring at it, and it's so close that he can actually see inside of it, and he can see gray beings inside looking down at him from the ship.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
That's very
that's
close.
Spooky. Yeah, that's way too close for my comfort.
This is technically a close encounter of the third kind.
Well, yeah, because he actually saw what they look like.
Yes, you actually saw them, and you know.
Right.
So
you said it was it chased them for 30 miles, correct?
Down the road.
And then that's crazy. And then it like kind of like lands or hovers in front of them.
And it stops in front of them in the highway.
Place? Okay.
So like they're like on the highway trying to get away from this thing, and it's just messing with them basically. Like they felt like it was kind of just
playing cat and mouse.
Like so Barney obviously does not want to ever believe that it was aliens or anything kind of UFO. But he does feel like it might be like some sort of something related to the government or like Air Force related like UFO, something like man-made. Huh. At least, because the way it was acting. But even with
the aliens, though, that he saw inside of it, the gray people?
Yeah.
He still thinks that?
They were like gray humanoid creatures, which from that distance, he can't really see it. She couldn't really see it that well.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it was pretty crazy. He said he saw about 9 to 11 of them, and they were dressed in uniforms, and they were hairless.
Oh.
And
there was 9 or 10 on the ship? Wow.
Yes, and he could just see them.
That's a lot.
There was like a window kind of thing, and they were close enough with the binoculars that he could see inside, which is kind of crazy. So a lot of them don't really describe them until they come out of the ship.
Right. To see them actually inside through like the glass or whatever protective covering they had.
It's kind of wild.
That's pretty crazy.
So as he's watching them, they are clearly like watching them as well. So like he can tell that they're looking back at him. And these red lights, which are like wings, start extending from the ship. Like it's like these like little wings, and then something drops out of the bottom of the craft, and then a sort of like bridge ramp starts to come down, and that's when he's like, oh, we need to go. So he
why does this sound like something out of Bugs Bunny with the Martian? Doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, I don't mean to make fun of the story at all, but it just kind of, I'm just picturing it in my head, and I'm just thinking, this sounds like, when Bugs Bunny meets, the Martian from Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, it is pretty...
So he freaks out because this weird things.
Yeah, it's clearly about to like try and make contact with him if he does. So he's like, we need to go.
Okay.
So he runs back into the car, and they're like, okay, we're going. So he's driving to escape. They just keep going. While they're driving, they start to hear beeping sounds, and they described it as like, have you ever heard of what a tuning fork sounds like?
Yeah. You used to have.
Yeah,
that,
I had one.
when
I
were
would
playing
used to
the
play
piano.
with it.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
The beeping sounded like
it kind of like reverberates or whatever.
And it sounded like it was coming from the trunk of the car. And they heard
of their car.
Of their car. They kept hearing.
Oh wow!
Because eventually, so like while they were driving this part, she like looked out the window and she did not see the vehicle at all. Because he was convinced it was still following them. But they didn't see anything. But then they heard those sounds.
Was it above them, though? You know how, like, sometimes they'll, like, hover above you?
Yeah, well, I mean, she stuck her head literally out the window to look, okay, so I don't know. But, like, as soon as she stuck her head back in the window is when they heard the sound. So I don't know if they were waiting for her to, like...
Right, gotcha.
Because they didn't want her to see
put her head in so they couldn't see... Right, so they couldn't see them. Got it.
So they both start to feel tingly when they hear the sound.
Oh, yeah, that's not good.
And they felt, like, very, like, in a dream state almost. And it felt like only moments later when they come back to like consciousness and they hear a buzzing sound, but it was different than the first sound, but it was like a buzzing, and then they realized they were 35 miles down the highway from where they had been originally, so they had missing time.
Oh, that's never good.
Yeah, no. Clearly something happened between this, from the sound they heard, and then they came back and they noticed they were 35 miles down the highway.
Right, and they can't remember anything.
Yeah, they cannot remember anything. They just felt like they were like in a dream-like state, like you know. Like, they weren't very conscious of whatever the heck happened.
Right, yeah. That's scary that they don't remember and they weren't conscious, so they don't know what happened to them.
So they were like, what the heck? So they kind of try and, like, talk it off, try and act like nothing crazy just happened. So they do arrive back in Portsmouth it's about daybreak, so it's about the morning. It took, so originally when they left, it should have only taken them a 4-hour drive, but when they realized it took them 7 hours to get back home.
Oh, so they lost like 3 hours of time?
I don't know about 3 hours, but maybe 2, because remember, they did stop and get out of the car.
Oh, that's right.
So there was times where they stopped to, like, stare at it.
To see what was going on and investigate.
I don't think it's exactly, like,
gotcha.
3 hours
maybe like
of
an hour and a half.
But, like, maybe at least an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, depending on how long they stopped, because we don't know exactly.
Right.
But yeah, so when they do get home, and they're like, what the heck, they feel very off. Betty notices her dress had been ripped. And this was the first time she had ever worn it. And she does not remember ripping it at all.
That's creepy.
So that's one of the weird things. Physical. So they had, felt like they were contaminated because they were kind of concerned about radiation. Because, like, a ship, whatever.
Right. No,
so Betty makes a call to her sister to tell her about what happened. And she knew that they had a physicist that lived next door to them. They were, like, one of their neighbors. So that they could ask the neighbor about the possible contamination and see what they should do about that. So the physicist is like, you should go outside and see if a compass reacts weird by the car, just out of curiosity, which sounded like he kind of knew something, because when they went outside to examine the car, they actually had noticed that there were these large spots on the car where it looked like it was polished clean, like really strange spots. And they were, like, distinct pattern. It was just kind of, like, splotches almost. And when they placed the compass near those spots, the compass would spin rapidly. But, like, when not by those spots, it was normal.
That's
just
weird.
Very unusual. It means that the electromagnetic, there was something electromagnetic field was messed
up.
up. Yeah.
Something happened. Huh.
And they did hear that sound. Remember the buzzing sound from the back of the trunk? So clearly they had interacted with, or whatever the heck was messing with them, had messed with the trunk.
Yeah.
So they were also told, like, hey, you should notify the Air Force Base, because there's an Air Force Base nearby to that area, because, you know, like, they would be able to tell if there was some sort of, like, training, you know, normally.
Right, going on. Yeah, because that's what happens nowadays when you report it. They'll always, like, well, check with the Air Force.
Always check with the Air Force. So their watches would never work again, which is kind of unusual.
Yeah, so it messed with the timepiece on the watch. Yeah. Interesting. Huh.
So when they call the Air Force, and the Air Force is pretty interested in their stories, they bring them in, they actually give them, like, an interview. It's like a 6-hour interview they did with the Air Force.
Sure.
And the Air Force actually let them know that there was another sighting had been spotted that night on the radar of the Air Force Base. Like, something unusual, like, around the same time.
Really? Interesting. Well, no wonder why they interviewed him for 6 hours. Because if they thought they were crazy, I feel like they wouldn't have spent 6 hours interviewing them.
Yeah, that seems like a long time. And it was like a higher up at the Air Force Base was interested. Like, the first person they talked to didn't seem too interested in the story until they had mentioned how its wings had expanded. Remember the red lights that they saw that were, like, expanded out? Well, that apparently seemed to have interested the Air Force Base enough that they got them, like, the higher interview.
Oh, wow.
And then so they had also been talking to, like, someone in the police force. Because they were, that person happened to be at her sister's house at the time. And he's like, oh, we were told if anyone sees any UFOs or anything like that, that needs to be notified to the Air Force immediately. Which sounds like they had been already trying to get those. Or like they had been kind of expecting it almost, you know?
Right, yeah.
That was interesting. So like 10 days after, Betty actually started having these very intense, vivid dreams about her experiences. You know, like how people do the recall thing for abduction
where they'll
cases?
go under, like...
hypnosis therapy.
Yes,
So apparently she had these dreams, and they were pretty crazy, and then when she went under hypnosis therapy, a lot of her dreams lined up with what she had seen, apparently, during the time.
Huh.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So they didn't actually talk about it very publicly at first. Like I said, Barney didn't really want that kind of press
publicity. Yeah, I don't blame him. Right.
Especially, but Betty was really interested and thought it was something that needed to be spoken about. So they did talk about it at their church. Was one of the places they talked about it, and they did talk to some UFO researchers. There was actually a news article that kind of released what kind of landed it, and now it's like one of the most talked about cases. UFO cases.
Well, wasn't that like one of the first cases?
Yes, I think it was because it wasn't really popular either. You know what I mean?
No, right?
Not that during that time period, the 1960s.
No,
I didn't think that. When was like the UFO boom? Wasn't that like 70s?
It would have been late 60s. Didn't you say this happened in what 64?
1961.
61. Okay, so it was I would think it was more like the late 60s. The middle of the 60s when that started, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so it was definitely
you had
one of the, and it was also a really well documented one too. Like
because Orson Welles was reading War of the Worlds, remember? And everybody got all in a panic about that.
So
they had that going on then too.
Yeah, if people are interested, they're like they did do the like hypnotherapy stuff. I didn't really include that in my research just because it was like a lot of people are like it's a little controversial to talk about.
Right, exactly.
Just because we don't know if it's just like them trying to put.
Somebody trying to put ideas in their head, or what they really remembered from the experience.
Or it's real. Like, obviously, it's pretty creepy if it is real, but like I said, I think he died. Barney died pretty soon after this. He died at like 45, which is kind of young.
Yeah. Huh.
And then
do they think it was from what happened to them?
I think it said he died of cancer.
So did he get radiation from being in that ship?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Because I guess that is something you would get from. He died of a cerebral hemorrhage. Oh, and she died of cancer in 2004.
So she died a lot later.
Yeah,
not just recently. Okay.
Like she became like a local celebrity in the UFO community, basically.
Oh, I bet. Because
I bet she especially after he died, I think she went like really. She talked to a lot
on the circuit places. And talked to different places about.
Which I mean, I think it's a really interesting case, especially considering that they had like physical evidence too.
Yep.
And she had her dress tested by a lot of
scientists
and stuff to see if there was anything. But I mean, the dress had been tested so late after. Who knows?
Right. Yeah.
Really interesting. There's also a documentary about it on Discovery Plus. If you're interested in learning more, like it goes down deep, and it also talks to like her niece. Her niece goes on and because like I guess she was there when it all happened and like went and visited her and saw the car and everything.
Oh wow. Huh.
Yeah, basically she had her whole family over after and like told them all the story and
wow.
They saw the car in person. And like she wanted to like touch the car and they were like, no, don't, it might be contaminated. Because they didn't know then.
Right.
Because it's the 1960s. Like, you know, when you think about it.
Huh.
But it was definitely a interesting case for sure. Yeah, what do you have for us?
Let's see. This week I am doing a story about the ghost of Gladstone Villa. Oh. And this was like a true story by the person that actually lived in the home from 1969 to 1978 with his family, and some of the interactions and some of the phenomena that happened while he was living in that house. Our story takes place, like I said, from 1969 to 1978 in a mining town called Borgode in the south of Wales in the UK. There were 5 members of the family, including Andrew Dexter, who is where a lot of the story basically comes from, is Andrew, who shared with some people online about what happened to him and his family when they lived in this home. Also living with him were his grandparents, Bill and Rita Higgs, and then his mom, Caroline Dexter, and his dad, which they didn't mention what his dad's first name was, but dad didn't live with them for very long because his mom and dad ended up getting divorced. So his dad only experienced a little bit of it. He didn't experience as much of stuff as his grandparents and his mom and him did. So the paranormal activity in their home started shortly after the birth of Andrew in 1969. He said that activity began with just like tappings happening, like on the wall. They'd hear like a tap, tap, tap.
Huh.
And it wouldn't be all the time. It would be just like, sporadically, and every now and then when it would happen. Activity in the house, though, would increase over time. And there are many incidences, and I'm going to tell you about some of the incidences that happened in the home. There's one incident in particular that his mom remembers when the whole family was downstairs in their like family room, and they were watching TV or whatever. And they heard what sounded like somebody was jumping from this was like a 3-story, I guess a 3-story. So it had like your main floor, and then the second floor where the bedrooms are, and then it had like a third floor that was like their attic where they could store stuff in that. And they had like one of those doors that pulled down from the ceiling, like you see, in some of the old movies and that. And the door that led up to the attic that was basically in the ceiling, they heard this giant thump, and it sounded like somebody was jumping from their attic to the second floor landing that they had in their house. So everybody hurried up and got up and ran to go see what was going on because they thought somebody had broken into the house. And when they got to the second floor landing to see what was going on, there was nobody there, but the door that the hatch that was in the ceiling that went to the attic had come open on its own and was like open there. So that was something that was rather strange when it had been shut before that incident happened. So whatever came down from the attic at that time basically took residence in his grandparents' bedroom, he said. He said you could hear walking in that bedroom when nobody was in there, like when everybody would be downstairs in the evenings, they would all gather around and watch, shows on the TV and stuff, or the grandma would be reading or whatever she liked to do. And they would hear what sounded like somebody walking and dragging like a foot or maybe a heavy object behind them, and you could hear it. And the grandfather was really interested, so he would run around the house pointing to the ceiling where he thought he heard the sound coming from. There's another story of Andrew's mom going up to wake up his dad from a nap that he had been taking in the grandparents' bedroom that's now haunted by whatever spirit was in there. And when she entered the room, she found her husband laying on the bed sound asleep, but there was an ironing board balancing on top of him while he's sleeping. So his dad woke up and freaked out, obviously, seeing, having this ironing board like balancing on your body and stuff. And so the mom, pulled it off of him, but they don't know how the ironing board got there. Then at another particular occasion, the police got called to the house because they had been hearing a lot of noise in the attic and they thought somebody had broken in again. So they called the police. The police came to investigate the strange noises that they were hearing, but all of the couple of officers that came were too scared and reluctant to actually go into the attic to investigate the noises. And they basically told them that, there's probably an open window up there and you need to latch the window better or whatever. But they wouldn't go in the room because they were so scared by it. They had a friend of the family that came over named Ivy Francis, and this lady was a skeptic. She didn't believe in, any of this stuff, and she had heard all the stories. She was a friend of the grandma's, and she had heard from the grandma, all the stuff that was going on in the house, and she didn't believe them. So while she was over there, she actually witnessed some of what had been going on in the house. So she encouraged them to reach out to a local paper to have them maybe help shed some light on what was going on. And she also told them they should have a medium come into the house to see what was going on and try and figure out, why that one particular bedroom was haunted.
Yeah.
So they did end up hiring the medium. It was a guy by the name of John Matthews. And when he got into the house, he began to communicate with the spirit, and he would communicate with it by having it knock on certain walls or like the ceiling in the house. So after he had made contact with the spirit, he decided that he was going to go into a trance to see if he could make contact and find out the name of the spirit. Well, when he went into the trance, he was not able to find out what the spirit's name was. But when he came out, he did tell them what they already knew. You know, you guys do have it's an earthbound spirit, and it's trapped in the house until it can get whatever unfinished business it has here on Earth to get done. So after the medium wasn't much help to them, they decided to have a priest come by the name of Graham Jones and have him come bless the house. So he came and he blessed the property and he said a few prayers. And the house was very quiet for quite a few months after that, but it ended up returning, and then things really ratcheted up after the priest came. So one evening, the grandparents and his mom and him were all watching TV in the family room when his mom screams really loud because she had looked to her left and she had saw the full figure of a monk standing in the doorway. Now, you know, the rest of the family was sitting in the same room as her, and they all looked, and by the time they, you know, were startled by her and looked, it was gone. But she later described in detail what the monk looked like. She said it was a monk in the typical brown robe, so, you know, it was like a full color apparition that she saw. And it also had with a hood over its head, so she really couldn't see the face. But they say that it sounds exactly like a 16th century Benedictine monk, basically, was what she said he looked like. But the most frightening experience that Andrew had ever had in the home was when he was alone by himself in the house, in that particular bedroom. He said he had went up there and he was laying on the bed and he was looking out the window and he had the lights on because, you know, the room was haunted and he didn't want to be scared by whatever was in there. And he felt something heavy pounce on the bottom of the bed.
Oh.
He said he then felt the bed bounce, but when he went to look, there was no one there. So he hurried up and he ran downstairs to tell, you know, the rest of his family, his mom and his grandparents. And by the time everybody made it back upstairs to see what had startled him, the only thing that they could find were distinctive paw marks that were on the bed, like that of an animal. Well, he later found out that his grandfather, Bill, had a black Labrador dog called Tovey, who had died before he was born. So they think that incident was actually the family's dog that had passed away.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like, what's her face?
Yeah, right? Like Nacho. Yeah, our cat. Funny thing is, though, when his grandfather had a friend over one time, they were both looking out the window in that bedroom. And his friend told him that when he was leaning out the window, it felt like something brush up against his leg. So they think the dog was actually, you know, brushing up against the friend's leg also when he was in the room. And there's another experience that they had in the house, and it was with his grandfather, Bill, and his mom. And they claimed that sometimes they would hear a baby crying in the house during different times of the day. So activity got so bad in the house that his mom, his grandmother, and him would all sleep downstairs on the downstairs with the lights on. Now, the grandfather continued to stay in the haunted room and would experience sleep paralysis and other strange, you know, phenomenon going on. His grandmother, Rita, went into the haunted bedroom one day to get his grandfather up from a nap he had been taken. And when she went up there, the grandfather was like laying on the bed asleep still, and she said the closet door opened wide on its own, and she didn't stick around to find out what was coming out of it. She just ran out of there very quickly. Many more you're right, I know. So they say many more experiences have happened to the family up until 1978, when the property was sold and it turned into an hotel called the Reds Park Hotel. Now, they had one final experience the night before they were moving out. So Andrew and his mom and his grandma were going to bed, and they were again down in the main part of the home, down like in the family room area. And they had, I guess, locked the door there. And all of a sudden, they said the doorknob started to turn and jingle like somebody was trying to break in. And then they also heard, like, I guess they had all their bags and their, you know, all their boxes packed, and they were waiting for the movers to come. And they heard what sounded like somebody was throwing around all their luggage and all their boxes and that in the hallway. And they had like somebody had made a big mess. So Andrew decided on his 40th birthday that he was going to go back to the Reds Park Hotel, which used to be his old family home, for old time's sake, just to check it out, and see and have dinner there or whatever. So while he was there, he started talking to some of the staff, especially the female staff that worked there, and they started telling him about all the ghosts and stuff and the phenomenon that was happening in the hotel. And then he started to tell them about what happened to him and his family when they lived there 30 years before. So some of the experiences that the staff were having, since they had started using the hotel the house as a hotel, was they reported lights going on and off. This was like in 2008, by the way, that he went and visited there. So this is quite recently. They would have an odd sighting would happen in room 5. They didn't specify what the odd sighting was in room 5, but there was like sightings that would happen in room 5. There was a bride in white that was seen numerous times throughout the building, and there was claims of a baby crying. So after hearing all about these stories, and after he told them about everything he experienced when him and his grandparents and his mom lived there, he decided to do some research on the property. So he found out that the Gladstone Villa dates back to the 1900s and was named after the former British Prime Minister, William Gladstone. After the Gladstones, I guess, lived there for a short while, the Kennett family, Michael and Evelyn, lived in the house in 1924, and they were a newly married couple, and they had a young son named Elvin Kennett. Now, Elvin, he died on the property at the age of 4 months old, which they believe explains the baby that they always, that people hear crying from time to time on the property or in the house. He also found out that the property opposite of the former Gladstone Villa property had a priest hide, or like a priest hole is what they called it, and that it had been sealed up. Now, I've never heard of this. I had no idea what this was. So I checked it out. A priest hide actually came about during when Queen Elizabeth I was in charge of England at the time. And remember, she was very much against Catholics, and she was only for Protestants and all that. And the priests and all religious people at the time that were not Protestant were being beaten and hung and killed and all that. So they would have these secret rooms that were inside in like people in public places and private homes and that. And the priest would hide in there so they wouldn't be persecuted by, Queen Elizabeth. So anyway, he found out that that particular place had that hide in there, and that's how he came to figure out that's where the monk was coming from, was from that instance. So he said that all this is true. It all happened. All the names have not been changed. You can, find out these people's names, talk to them if you want. He also said that the house still stands today, and it is actually used as a hotel, and it's called the Gladstone now. And it is on Cardiff Road, where it originally sat when he lived there, in Bargoed in Wales, UK. So, yeah, that's all I have on the ghost of the Gladstone Villa. But I thought that was interesting that the experiences that him and his family had were the same experiences that the owners and the workers at the hotel were having too, and that, other people could collaborate they talked about, establish what he had talked about experiencing. So if you're ever in Wales and you want to go check it out, you can go there. Apparently you can stop there and eat in that, or you can stay in one of their rooms. Apparently number 5 is quite the scare, so you might want to stay there. But that's all I have this week.
Well,
hopefully everybody has a great Valentine's Day.
Well, if you enjoyed our podcast today, follow us on Instagram at 2ScaredyCatsPodcast, and please be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really helps the show get discovered. And tune in 2 weeks for a new episode. And to all our scaredy cats and kittens out there, remember, curiosity didn't kill these 2 scaredy cats.